Mini episode 595 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by Sportsology, delivering unconventional columns and webcasts about sports, TV, music, movies, and more. Follow them on the web at sportsology.com.
The FDH Lounge. You'll want to schedule your life around it.
A long time ago, on a gloomy, wet Cleveland spring night, two men stand alone amidst the late-night drizzle. Their voices echo across the vacant station parking lot as they debate the merits of the great American radio show that have been missing for far too long. On that night, an idea was born. That idea became the FDH Lounge. Welcome to the FDH Lounge.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to mini episode 595 of the FDH Lounge. This is FDH managing partner Rick Morris. Got a great conversation coming up for you here today. It's time to preview the NCAA football season for 2015. And in doing so, we were bringing back to the show old friend Fran Stuchbury from OurSports Central. And, of course, there's a lot of different things you can do this time of year talking football. And one thing that I think Fran has in common with Darren Sproles of his hometown Philadelphia Eagles is that you can line up Sproles pretty much any place on the field and look for him to score. You can put him in the slot, you can put him in the backfield, etc. I don't really know anybody that watches more football at all different levels than does Fran. Not just NFL and high-level NCAA football, but lower-level NCAA football, semi-pro, lower-level professional, arena league, et cetera, et cetera. He also covers tennis quite in-depth and a number of other sports. Very well-versed to have any discussion that you could want to have for football. So who better to talk college football with in the 2015 season than, as I said, our old friend Fran Stuchbury. A pleasure to welcome him back to the show. Fran, how are you today, my man?
I'm doing pretty good, Rick. Great to be back talking football with you.
Oh, it's great to have you on. Like I said, there's nobody I know that watches more of this at all different levels than do you, and really looking forward to getting your insights on what we have to look forward to this season. As I had indicated to you off air, wanted to lead with this because this is sort of a macro-level question that I've gotten. Something that I think is still probably sneaking up on most people, because I think most people are just accustomed to the way everything went last year. You had the semifinal bowl games on New Year's Day, and they were a huge hit. And I think it probably still hasn't dawned on the majority of the populace this is going to happen only one out of every 3 years because of the Rose Bowl. They are intractable with that 5 o'clock New Year's Day slot. The price for getting them to play along with being part of the New Year's Six is to have the semifinals on New Year's Eve the other 2 years when they are not included in it. This year will be the Orange Bowl and the Cotton Bowl on New Year's Eve. And Bill Hancock, a past guest on the show, he has spoken kind of bravely of, we're going to redefine the viewing habits of the American public. We're going to kind of turn this around. We're going to capture the night for NCAA football. I have no doubt that it's going to be a monster hit anyways, Fran, but on the level of what we saw last year, can it possibly live up to that with the plans that everybody generally makes, from going to Times Square if you're in New York to going to New Year's Eve parties around the country? What do you think they're running into as far as trying to redefine New Year's Eve in this country?
I think it may take time. I think it's going to be a work in process simply because you're not just catering towards the diehard folks. I will watch. You will watch. But will your wife or girlfriend or better half or friends watch when they can go out and socialize? The thing is, Rick, we both know that it could be an afterthought at these parties and things. The first game everyone will be glued to, but then the second game people might not be as entwined to it. And let's imagine let's just say the game goes into like double or triple overtime, which could happen if it's a close game. Imagine it getting to the point where the game is on or the ball is going to drop. What are you going to watch? The ball dropping or a game? What do you think?
You're right. Well, with the level of commercial interruptions that we have in these games, extending them, you're absolutely right. I think that'll happen, if not this year, then certainly some year in the very near future. And to build on that a little bit more, I want to ask you about this and see if you find this as ludicrous as I do. I've had a friend say to me, and I don't remember which one specifically, which is probably just as well, because I thought this was a pretty dumb comment. Well, there's always been football on New Year's Eve. You know, they play the Chick-fil-A Bowl. I'm going, really? Really? You want to compare that to the doubleheader that is going to determine the national championship pairing? I mean, for the thought that there's always been football on New Year's Eve versus the magnitude of what it's going to be this year. What do you think the difference in magnitude is?
Well, magnitude is just you have games, but not as big, huge marquee games. Yes, the games New Year's Eve were fun to watch, but they weren't that bang. We have to watch it. I mean, we had last year. We had Boise, Arizona, which was a good game. It was entertaining. It was exciting, but it's not that game where the winner advances, the loser goes home, Rick.
Absolutely. And, again, that pretty much makes it everything because we spend the entire season counting down to it. And that process that we went through last year of kind of learning all together this was going to be like, this very disparate committee out there that includes the likes of Condoleezza Rice as well as athletic directors at a number of different schools. They would kind of hammer this out at several points during the season. There would be the shows on ESPN on a weekly basis to introduce this. And yet you had the eventual national champion, Ohio State, really kind of coming up through the rearview mirror. That early loss to Virginia Tech, many thought probably eliminated them. So what kind of lessons do you think at the beginning of the season that we can draw from that as far as losses in September and whether or not they maybe fail to a team's chances?
Well, bottom line is, Rick, if you get a chance to play in a championship game, you get redemption. If Ohio State was in the Big 12 and they lost, they would not have had a redemption where they were able to play themselves into the championship, play themselves into the Final Four, which they did when they won the Big Ten championship. And that's the thing. Baylor and TCU did not have that extra game. Next season they might have relegation where 10 teams can, the Big 12 can have a final game to showcase themselves and make their case to be one of the Final Four teams.
Let's start there because isn't that sort of the worst case scenario all the way around for the Big 12? Because this whole thing about settling it on the field, you had an outcome that played out a certain way between Baylor and TCU, and then at the end of the season you sort of had it playing out the other way as far as which team was looking a little bit better, and they really did kind of split the votes of each other. So as far as determining it on the field, which I know is what Art Briles was trying to hang his hat on, you're right. That seems to be a situation where they're going to be hurt by not having a championship game, and I think you could pretty easily see it happening again. It
definitely can happen again, and the problem is that they may not be able to make that case. And the other thing is Baylor, they play cupcakes on their schedule. I know they were a bad team when they scheduled these teams years ago, but if you want respect, you got to play some better teams on that schedule. You can't play these FCS teams and lower school teams. No disrespect to SMU, who they're playing the home opener, but you got to play better big conference opponents to get the respect. You can't just win. You can't just win in your conference. Otherwise, you're going to have to go undefeated. If you don't go undefeated, one blemish and you're gone.
I think that's definitely the lesson when you look at it from last year. You're absolutely right, Fran. In terms of scheduling, there are now conferences that are having mandates, such as the Big Ten, about only playing power conferences in the years ahead as far as the non-conference games. And I can tell you from watching Ohio State here in my home state of the Buckeye State that there have been a lot of cupcakes on the schedule in recent years. And it's definitely going to cause a little bit of disruption there once that fully kicks in. But let's start there. The Big Ten East with the national champions. When you look at the real power divisions of college football this year, that's definitely on the short list. Ohio State, the recent rival Michigan State, having split the two big games the last couple of years. Michigan working in the rearview mirror with Jim Harbaugh. It's just a question of how long it's going to take to get that turned around. And a little bit closer to where you're at, Penn State. We keep hearing all these great things about the successes that James Franklin is having on the recruiting trail. So everyone's got Ohio State basically in the leadership role here in the division coming into this season. But is there a chance that it may end up being more bunched up than people think right now?
Well, the bottom line is Ohio State's going to be at least 10-point favorites or Vegas point spread favorites every single game this season. I mean, it's going to be a tough challenge for anyone to beat them. They're so dominant, and the thing is, instead of having a 3-quarterback controversy, now they're down to 2, which makes sense because Braxton Miller can be a good wide receiver or make an impact catching passes.
Absolutely, that played out in a way that was expected by many. but it was still kind of interesting to see it shake out that way. You've got to go back to Rod Gerald back in '78, making room for Art Schleister to kind of see any kind of precedent there. Again, you look at what happened in the postseason with Cardale Jones, the big games en route to the national championship, and Ezekiel Elliott, the way that he had the 3 200-yard games, unprecedented in Ohio State history for a back to be able to do that. I say, in looking at it, Fran, I think that the arm of Cardale Jones and forcing the defensive backs to kind of play off the line a little bit more made a difference, opened it up for Elliott. You're not playing this sort of standard spread collegiate offense that you see so much these days, but it's got a little bit more of a downfield threat, I think, with Cardale Jones and the cannon in there. So I'm a little bit concerned about this thought that he may be the secondary quarterback or playing the sort of Tim Tebow circa 2006 role in that offense. How do you see it shaking out between he and J.T. Barrett?
Well, I think they'll go with the high hand, and we also know an injury can easily happen, so that problem can be taken care of if that's, yes. What could happen last season. But I kind of feel that their coach Obermeyer, he will go with the hot hand. He's not going to rotate quarterbacks back and forth. This is not Steve Spurrier, what he did with the Florida Gators. He's not going to do that. He's going to go with the guy that's going to best give him the win, because they say sometimes you either have two quarterbacks or you have no quarterbacks. So I think in this case it's good to have a guy that can come off the bench and perform if the injury happens. But I feel you have to stick with one main guy that can lead you to a championship.
That's a tremendous point. That's how we ended up here in the first place. After all, was the injuries last year and a very, very strange season the way that it shook out. But as you've indicated, Ohio State is going to be a very, very large favorite in most of the games on the schedule here. A lot of people already have them penciled in for one of the 4 bowl spots there, the semifinal spots at the end, as they were in last year. Another of the very tough power divisions in college football this year, of course, the SEC West. Most people making a case for either Auburn or Alabama to win the division. A few people looking over at LSU, which is coming off of a down year by their standards. The 2 Mississippi schools, they may have peaked last year, but they'll still be in the discussion this year. Even hearing a little bit of dark horse sentiment here for Arkansas. Brett Bielema in what I believe is the 3rd year at that program to possibly lead them through the weeds and sneak up on everybody. He's had some pretty good recruiting classes. How do you see that one shaking out? Because to me it could be as wild as it was last year, where you just had them all beating the snot out of each other.
Well, the thing is, these teams are going to beat each other up every single week, and that's what happens with the SEC. Every week, as we saw, it was like a flavor of the week. First, it was Mississippi State, then it was Ole Miss, then it was Alabama, then the list went on and on last year with teams that were, we were thinking that they could be in the Final Four in October and November, and then they get knocked off. The problem is that that conference is too dominant and too physical, where possibly with 2 losses, you can still make a case to be one of the Final Four teams.
Absolutely. And as far as 2 teams coming out of the same division, I think it's the SEC West that we were all thinking of in terms of that being a possibility when this new system was rolled out and when it was indicated that there was not going to be any restriction on the number of teams from a conference or even a division represented in there. But right about now, the SEC West, I think most of us would say, is running neck and neck with the Big Ten East, as well as the latest power addition to the group, the Pac-12 South. And this one, to me, is going to be very, very interesting. I can't wait to watch some of the matchups between the teams this year. Not just the classic crosstown rivals, USC, UCLA, but you put Arizona and Arizona State with their rising programs in the mix. How do you see that one shaking out? Because it seems to me to be fairly unpredictable in terms of looking at that and seeing who's going to represent them in the championship game.
Well, I think USC is going to win that part of the division. I think Cody Kessler is going to have a monster season. Skarskisian, hopefully, that drinking thing is not a distraction for the team. I don't think it will be, but I think USC could be one of the Final Four teams. If they win the Pac-12 championship. Oregon is tough to tell. They have some very tough games. They have a brutal game against Big Ten powerhouse Michigan State second week, and that's a revenge game for Michigan State because Oregon lost to them and beat them last season.
Yes. One of the few times that you see these real high-level home-and-home games these days in college football. As the conferences all tighten up their scheduling in the years to come, maybe we'll see some more of these. But that one really kind of stands out. That one's going to be exceptional. You talk about Oregon in the north. I know some people are making kind of a dark horse case for California with the rebuilding of that program. You've got Washington. You certainly don't expect them to be down very long. So does it seem as cut and dried as Oregon, USC? Those seem to be kind of the favorites going in. But how do you see the North shaking out?
Well, I'm not sure because I think Oregon may lose some games. People think they can lose 3 or 4 games because they have some very tough road games on the schedule. They have USC, they have some Arizona State, they have some tough games that they're not going to be easy for them to do. And plus, you have a quarterback which I like a lot from Eastern Washington, the FCS guy who transferred over, and I mean he's going to in the fire very quickly simply because you have a game against Eastern Washington the first week, then you have to play at Michigan State, where he will be tested. I don't know if he had enough practice and reps to perform.
No question about that. In terms of other teams that we may see in the mix here, because it's kind of interesting that Oregon, if they can make it through that schedule, that they loom as a powerhouse in the Pac-12 North, because when you get to the other conferences that have the power divisions, you don't really sort of have that balance there. In the SEC East, a lot of people are talking up Tennessee. Butch Jones has done a great job with rebuilding. The recruiting has gone very, very well in the last couple of years. Some people thinking they may be ready to make a run. In the Big Ten West, you've got Minnesota, who might be able to come out of that pack there. A lot of people seem to be defaulting to Wisconsin and Nebraska, even though they've had the coaching turnovers. But Minnesota seems due to take that next step there. So, and any thought on in those two conferences, if anybody, whoever ends up winning those divisions is going to be a massive underdog in the championship game. But is there any kind of a case to be made for anybody, do you think?
Well, I think you give Wisconsin the case. I think they're in a much better place with Paul Chryst as the head coach. He was the offensive coordinator for Wisconsin. The team performed well under him, so they can go back to more of their smash mouth football. Gary Anderson liked to dink and dunk. Now he's much happier in Corvallis and Oregon State, being out west, that's where he's from. I think you can make a case for Wisconsin. Nebraska, it's hard to tell. Mike Riley, Oregon State coach, first year. It's going to take time for him to win. He's a good coach, but I don't know if he's going to make them a championship team. He hasn't with his other teams he's coached.
That's very interesting because when you look at the coaching hire at Nebraska, when you look at it at Florida, it really kind of makes you wonder, with all due respect to Riley and to Jim McElvain, if it's not a sense of the bloom being off the rose a little bit. There's this expectation that a program that's kind of fallen on its posterior, like Ohio State, is going to go out and get an Urban Meyer and turn things around quickly, and that seems to be the standard these days. But what does that say about Nebraska, Florida, and some of the programs that had hires that some people thought were a little bit underwhelming? Is it just a matter of there's not enough Urban Meyers to go around, and that you sort of have to take a chance on some of these guys?
Well, you're looking for the high assistant. Look what happened with Houston and Tom Herman, the Ohio State coach, who went to. You look for the next young high assistant that's going to lead you to a championship. That's what they're trying to find. I don't blame them for doing that. I mean, Florida wanted the coach so bad they gave Colorado State a future game so they can get him out of his contract. Yeah.
And very interesting how that can be a good form of barter here, because these programs do make a lot of money, of course, in taking those high-profile losses. So that's always something that can be used to barter here. The only power conference that we haven't really discussed thus far, the ACC. You've got Florida State with their off-field issues and the transition at quarterback, a little bit of sense that some of the luster has been lost there. Most expect them still to be battling with Clemson atop the Atlantic Division. I'm hearing, Fran, an interesting amount of sleeper talk about Georgia Tech coming out of the Coastal Conference, or Coastal Division, not just necessarily to win the ACC, but possibly to be in the Final Four in the end there. When you look at the ACC, there doesn't appear to be anybody on paper that seems ready to jump into that class this year, but do you see it a little bit differently than me?
Well, I like Georgia Tech as a sleeper. I think Georgia Tech made a statement in their bowl game when they won big in the Orange Bowl last season. And the thing is, with them, they play Notre Dame on the schedule this year. That's another statement game for them. And Notre Dame doesn't want to play a triple option team. I mean, they struggle against Navy, and Georgia Tech is a better option team that throws the ball better. I don't think Notre Dame is happy to have two triple option teams on the schedule.
Absolutely. I mean, theoretically, once you get through the first game, it will help you a little bit for the next one. But you're right about that. And that, again, Georgia Tech, though, and that's one of the things, I've looked at that in recent years. I mean, theoretically, they should be one of the hardest teams out there to get ready for. And when you talk about that style, I need only go back to Ohio State kind of stubbing their toe a little bit playing Navy in recent memory. It was kind of the same thing. How do you get ready for a team like this? So a couple of years ago, maybe 3-4 years ago, it looked like Georgia Tech was getting ready to sort of take that next step. What do you attribute over the last couple of years for them not taking that next step, and ultimately this year being a year that is thought where they might break through? Is it just a matter of that their recruiting is sort of peaking at the right time?
The recruiting is better, and the thing is with bowl games, the problem is, as we saw years ago in the Peach Bowl, Chick-fil-A Bowl, you gave LSU a month to prepare for Georgia Tech's option, and they clobbered them. So the thing is, it depends on the matchup, the opponent, where the game is. It all depends on the variations of who they're playing, and they can contend with Florida State. They can contend with Clemson. The thing is, I think you gotta get them at home. Then a road game in a hostile environment for Georgia Tech is going to be a tough task to run that triple option and win the big game.
It's going to be, no question about that. You're right. In terms of the ACC, just in terms of being a legacy program along the lines of Florida State, you'll look at Miami. How good of a year do they need to avoid another turnover in that program here? Do they need to win like at least 10 games and make a good run at the conference championship? Because you sort of get the sense for Al Golden the time is running out in terms of trying to get it turned around.
I feel at least 9-10 games. Definitely win their bowl game. There's a lot of pressure on Miami. They were an elite team in the 80s and 90s. They won championships. The fans want a winner. They have a fan base that just demands winning. And if he doesn't have a 9-10 win season, I can see them making a change, and then we'll see who the next hot commodity is. We'll see, or maybe some NFL guy runs down there that gets fired. There's going to be somebody that's going to want that job. Who knows? Maybe John Gruden? Nah, he's happy with his ESPN gig. He'd rather broadcast, but you never know.
Well, absolutely, and you almost sort of get the sense, going back to what we said about Florida and Nebraska, that the kind of years they have may kind of weigh into that a little bit too, in the sense of if they fail to take any kind of a step forward this year, one wonders if it may kind of give a little bit of a second thought at certain programs about maybe we want to give one more look at what we have as far as going out there and making a choice that people may find underwhelming. So I sort of wonder whether or not the success that those programs may have this year or next year, if that may affect other programs when they're facing a similar kind of thought. Do we want to make a change, or do we want to stay patient a little longer? Well,
it kind of depends on who's out there. What coaches are out there? What coaches get fired? Because a perfect example, Rich Rodriguez. He did a terrible job with Michigan, but then he went to Arizona, and turned everything around. For another example, Mike Leach in Texas Tech. He had the off the field issues, and then he took Washington State to their first bowl game in forever. So you never know what type of high assistant, and you put him in a new location, he can turn things around.
That's a great point. It's all about time and place and how people fit into different programs. Stepping outside the power programs here, Notre Dame, looking at them, I've heard a couple of different things about them. There seems to be a consensus out there that they're, in terms of preseason rankings, of being just on the verge of the top 10. I think I had heard on Fox Sports Radio that was being bandied about by some experts that they may have their most talent in place possibly in the last 20 to 25 years. But they've been a program that's been kind of hard to get a read on the last couple of years with Brian Kelly. They seem to have a very, very high floor. He's an excellent coach. Their recruiting has been very good. Aside from one or two seasons, they haven't really sniffed going to that upper echelon where all their fans and alums seem to think that they belong permanently. So they're definitely, to me, one of the bigger X factors on the landscape this year. How do you see them shaking out?
Well, let's take a look at the schedule, Rick. They open against Texas. That's going to be a primetime NBC game. They play Virginia, which should win. Georgia Tech, the 19th. That's going to be a big game for them. We'll see where both those teams are. Then they play a cupcake in UMass, but then they have a very tough game at Clemson, which I think they're going to lose. Navy they'll probably beat. I think USC will probably beat them. And then they play Temple. Watch out for them. They might beat them. Then they play a game at Pittsburgh. I think they will win. They should beat Wake Forest. They may struggle against Boston College before to win, but I think they will lose to Stanford. So I'm thinking, Rick, they're going to be maybe a three-loss team, I think.
Absolutely, but it sounds like from what you're saying, and I agree if this is the case, that it's largely because of schedule that may be the case, because it is a very difficult year for them. So one wonders what the thought is going to be, the verdict on this season, if it plays out like what you're saying, because that's an outcome that might be a little bit disappointing based on the talent that they have on the team there. But if it is one of the more difficult schedules in the country, as it seems to be, that seems to be a little bit of a mitigating factor. So it'll be very interesting. A year like that surely would not threaten the future of Brian Kelly, but it does make you wonder internally if people might start to wonder what the time is going to be, if not now.
Well, another thing is they're going to think maybe Notre Dame should join a conference, but they don't want to give up the TV money with NBC. They don't want to give up millions of dollars. They'd rather be able to play their Navies and their USCs and their rivalries, make their money, and be part of a conference for their other sports.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of people, again, out there that have been saying that for a long time. They should do that. But, again, from the point of view of their own self-interest, you're right about that. As long as NBC is lining up to provide them the money, then there is no incentive for them to do otherwise. As you start to look around for some of the other teams out there that could end up in a Big Six game, because, again, there is going to be one spot always out there for a team outside the 5 power conferences. Of course, the perennial contender for that spot, the team that, as of right now, seems to be regarded year in and year out as the best team outside the power conference, is Boise State, especially since Utah went over to the Pac-12 and took themselves out of that particular conversation. So Boise is going to be in the mix this year. Of course, they first have to win the Mountain West for that to happen, but and in some years it does seem as though the gap has sort of narrowed a little bit between them and some of the other top programs there. So let's start in the Mountain West. Do you regard Boise as a fairly strong favorite this year, or is there anybody that's basically right there on their heels?
Well, Boise is a strong favorite. I mean, the thing is, the non-conference schedule, they open against Washington and they play at BYU. So those are challenging games. One team to keep an eye on, maybe they might have a tough challenge against Colorado State. That team is starting to up and come. Even with a coaching change in Colorado State, I think Colorado State can be competitive and compete in that conference. Another team to keep an eye on is Wyoming, because they're starting to improve a little bit and get things in gear. UNLV, they have a high school football coach. We'll see what he does. But it's kind of, I mean, besides from Boise State, it could be. I mean, Utah State could be competitive. They might Chucky Heaton come back for a 6th season off an injury. I think it's going to be Boise State. Boise State's going to be the team to beat, and I think Boise State will be getting be one in the Big Six games.
You would think so. You would think that they would be the team to beat among them. But, again, there are a number of other contenders out of the other conference as well. When we look at the Mid-American Conference, where my Ohio Bobcats play, unfortunately, I don't think the Bobcats will be in that particular conversation this year. But Northern Illinois in the West Division has been a team that has even cracked the major bowls at a time recently in the past here. So you've got them. When you look at the Sun Belt Conference, I don't know that anybody necessarily jumps out at me there off that landscape. When you go outside of Boise State, when you go outside the Mountain West Conference, any teams you see that could be making a case to be playing in the New Year's Six bowls?
Well, I mean, Georgia State won't make a case to play in the Big Six, but they will win the Sun Belt and play in their first ever bowl game. They were very talented last year. They dominated in their first year in the Sun Belt. Other teams to keep an eye on the Houston Cougars. I like the new coach and Herman from Ohio State. They're gonna have a good offense. Keep an eye on them. And the other conferences, with the Mountain West, I think Boise State's team, which I already mentioned. The other conferences, Conference USA. Keep an eye on Western Kentucky. That game against in the Popeyes Bahamas Bowl was one of the most exciting games. They have a high-power offense. They're going to be very exciting in Conference USA.
They do indeed, and that makes me think in terms of geography. Not too far away from them, a couple hours drive, Cincinnati in the American Athletic Eastern Conference. In terms of the rebuilding program that they've had in recent years, how do you see them shaking out this year?
I think they'll be decent. Tommy Tuberville's a good coach. He was smart to leave Ole Miss and go to Cincinnati because Texas Tech and be in Cincinnati because that's more for him. I think they'll be all right. It's just it's just a matter of they'll be I think they'll be competing with Houston for that in the American Athletic Conference. And also keep an eye on Navy. The first year there, we'll see how the triple option team does and they perform. I think Navy will definitely be a bowl team, but they might be a sleeper team in that conference.
Very interesting. Yeah, that's going to be fun to watch with Navy, with the games that they're going to have with Houston and some of the other schools in that conference. There, it'll be interesting to watch them see them play the likes of Memphis and some of the other schools there as well. So, as we get down to the teams likely to be there at the end in the Big Four games here, my sense in terms of looking at it this year, Ohio State over USC in the Orange Bowl, Alabama over TCU in the Cotton Bowl, Ohio State over Alabama in the national championship game. Is that anywhere close to where you might have it laid out, Fran?
That's kind of where I have it laid out a little bit. The only thing is I may put USC in that place instead of Oregon because I think Oregon's might have 2 or 3 losses possibly. I could be wrong, but I think Ohio State's a slam dunk. Also, I think whoever wins the Alabama-Auburn game the Friday after Thanksgiving will probably be the SEC representative. I think this year is the Big 12. I think it's going to be TCU, and I think Trevon Boykin is going to win the Heisman Trophy this year. No offense to Ezekiel Elliott, but and the other team, I don't see an ACC team going in there, Rick. And I'm sure you agree about that.
Very interesting. Okay, so there's a chance that they might just beat themselves up too much, huh?
I think I just don't see Florida State. I see those teams beating up each other. I think the only way an ACC team makes a case is if they're a one-loss team. But if they lose at least 2 games, I don't see an ACC team being in the Final Four. I think this year we have we have a committee now with somebody representing the Big 12. They're going to want redemption. They're going to want to take care of them. We know it's all politics, Rick, but we know that's how that works. They're going to whine. They're going to complain. If they're a one-loss team, if TCU is a one-loss team, they're going to definitely be in the Final Four.
Well, that's the way things often work in life. You get the makeup call the year after, it would seem. But as far as some of the other teams that I'm picking to be in the mix with the Big Six bowls, I've got Oregon, Michigan State, a third game in 2 years between them in the Sugar Bowl. I'm sorry, the Rose Bowl. Sugar Bowl, Clemson, Notre Dame. Fiesta Bowl, Baylor, Boise State, Peach Bowl, Auburn, Florida State. Any of the teams there seem likely to you to be representing in any of those games?
I think Auburn's going to. I think Auburn's going to be in there. Florida State will be in one of those Big Six. I'm going to throw a wild card out there. Keep an eye on Houston. But I think Boise State's going to be get the bid. But watch out for Houston because I think they're going to make a lot of noise. It's always going to be fun to see what happens because if like Northern Illinois goes undefeated, they can make a case like they did years ago. It's going to be very exciting to see what happens. But one thing I wanted to throw out there, a hot rumor for you. Let's just say Urban Meyer wins the championship next year or two. Do you think he gets the itch to be an NFL coach and maybe the Cleveland Browns and turn that franchise around? Then he has his legacy for the rest of his life.
That is very interesting. A local guy from Ashtabula who loves the Cleveland sports teams. We saw it during the NBA Finals when he talked about as a little kid going out to the Richfield Coliseum to root for the Cavs. So if it's another year of futility for the Browns, which I say as a Browns fan, unfortunately, looks very strongly like it's going to be, with the team being weakest at the team not having too many holes, but being weakest at quarterback and wide receiver, which are two of the 3 or 4 most consequential positions in the league right now. It is sort of set up for maybe a 4-12 season or something like that. The optimistic scenario from my point of view is it might set up for Cardale Jones the next year. But in terms of what you're saying, I wonder about my wish scenario of Cardale Jones in 2016. One wonders how that might play into it as well. That if you're Urban Meyer and you're looking at a situation like that and you may get a chance to coach this guy on the pro level, plus redeem the Cleveland Browns, I almost sort of wonder if my scenario and yours might not play out together, if there might not be some synergy there.
Yeah, I like to see that happen, but being a college football fan, don't you want to see Urban Meyer and Jim Harbaugh go at it for the next 5-10 years, that can be one of the biggest rivalries in college football. With the way they talk, the rivalry, the competitiveness, that those games will be huge every year. So it would be a shame if that rivalry gets cut short a little bit.
It would, and that is something that may play against that as well. The sense in his mind of it looking like that he may have run away from that rivalry. The sense that he's going to undo the goodwill that he built up at Ohio State if he leaves and they go back to 5-7 the next year and everybody's saying, gee, thanks, Urban. And also the sense, too, I don't know if, again, there's a lot of questions, unfortunately, with the Browns ownership with Jimmy Haslam, who has been very, very impatient in the past. But one would like to think, for as good of a job as Mike Pettin has done so far, one bad year is not going to get him canned when you look at the fact that they had no business going 7-9 last year and they still did. So there's an awful lot of things that are mitigating against your possible scenario, but we've seen some real shockers in years past here. So it does sort of make sense on paper, Urban Meyer looking to bring redemption to Cleveland. And you almost wonder, too, that how it might play into it with the Cavs being big favorites in the NBA next year, at least in the Eastern Conference. If the Cavs can end the Cleveland sports drought, does that in any way mitigate it with Urban Meyer? I would think that it probably wouldn't, because this is still a Browns town first and foremost, and I would think he's going to be looking at the Browns drought since 1964, even if that's a factor in his thought process. Even if the town of Cleveland has had a championship in another sport here, getting that Browns title would be on another level altogether, I think.
Well, I think he wants to cement his legacy. I think if he does the impossible, and we both know, Rick, the Cleveland Browns winning a Super Bowl is the impossible. It is the impossible. They've been made mocked for years. Now people are joking about their new uniforms. They've been mocked. They've been ridiculed. The Johnny Manziel, all the crazy draft picks. Brady Quinn was a bust. All the quarterbacks of Tim Couch, all the quarterbacks they've wasted have come there and been disasters. If he can turn that around and get them to a Super Bowl and win the championship, I mean, it would be a Cleveland Browns legacy. They would take over the whole entire town and city.
He'd be bigger than LeBron if that happened, no question about it. The interesting thing is, too, he's a pretty savvy guy. He can look at a roster and see, like I said before, the weird thing about my pessimism as a Browns fan for 2015 is that, as I say, you look up and down this roster, outside a quarterback, wide receiver, and tight end, there's really not too much to be upset about. Probably the best left tackle, left guard, center combination in the league if Alex Mack is back healthy this year. So an offensive line that is well above average. Running back core collectively that's pretty good. Defense that is really kind of beefed up. Again, strangely poor against the run last year. And I haven't talked to anybody who can quite figure out why that was the case. But you throw a Danny Shelton in the mix who looks like he's going to be a beast from day one. A secondary that's pretty good. Still got some questions, but pretty good. Again, one wonders if that might not be a factor as well, because Urban Meyer is going to look at this like, hey, this is a 4-12 team, if it plays out that way, that's actually much better than 4-12. You just got to address quarterback, wide receiver, and you can be on your way. So these are the kind of thoughts that might be in his head if it might be moving in the direction that you think.
Well, if he wins, I think if he wins 2 championships in a row, I think he's going to be even more tempted. Also, let's keep in mind, next year, Josh Gordon comes back. I know he has problems off the field, but I think Urban Meyer is the perfect coach to keep him to keep him on a straight line to turn his career around. I think Urban Meyer can turn Josh Gordon's career around, and he'll be back to being an all-pro wide receiver and have his life in order.
Well, absolutely, because he's a franchise player if his head's on straight. So that automatically, as you said, takes care of the one spot right there. The other one, I mean, you could, like I said, with the depth at other positions, you could mortgage a decent part of next year's draft, even if you're not high enough to get Cardale Jones. And I do think pessimistically that they're going to be right in the mix record-wise to be able to get him without too much maneuvering. So, yeah, that could be a factor as well. That is a real clip and save. We always like to have these on the show here, Fran, so it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out. Kudos to you for going out on a limb. And as mentioned before, of course, the listeners can find your fine work at OurSports Central. I know that you are always synonymous with a number of fine outlets. So before we leave here today, please be sure to put that over. Any of the work that you've got going on right now, what you're working on covering. I know tennis is always in the mix with you as well.
Well, the thing is, Rick, there's a good chance I'm going to be getting a season press pass for Temple House football games, and they have home games against Penn State and Notre Dame. Also, I'm covering a World Team Tennis charity event in Las Vegas, and the good news is UNLV is at home now, October 10th, so I get to see Mountain West football against against San Jose State, which will be a fun game to watch. So I get a chance to go to Vegas, do a little gambling, put some money on the Browns winning Super Bowl, and be a very rich man 6 months from now.
Well, you could also just set that money on fire, and it would probably bring you the same return. But I applaud your optimism, anyways, as it regards that, and certainly the payout would be substantial. I know that on our show recently here, I predicted a Super Bowl of San Diego, Arizona, to which my exasperated co-host said, Kyle Ross said, you need to go put money on that because at least you could make a ton if it pays off that way. So I recommend the same to you with the Cleveland Browns. If you want to go that way, you would make a ton. But always a pleasure having you on, Fran. Look forward to talking football with you again here in the near future. Thank you so much for being available for us today.
Thanks, Rick. Take care. Always a pleasure.
Excellent. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Fran. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in today to FDH Lounge mini episode number 595.
As we bring the show to a close, we would like to extend our deepest gratitude to NBC, CBS, ABC, Fox, all Clear Channel affiliates, TNT, TBS, USA, UPN, Deadspin.com, YouTube.com, YTMND.com, MySpace.com, various blogs, Fox News, CNN, CNBC, MSNBC, IamBoard.com, Billboard.com, Google.com, ESPN, ESPN2, ESPN News, ESPN Classic, NBA TV, NFL Network, Sports Time Ohio, Athlon Magazine, Comedy Central, Cartoon Network, The Boomerang Channel, QVC, BET, The Spice Channel, Steno Notebooks, Manwich, Papermate Office Supplies, Waitresses, Strippers, Bartenders, Garbage Men, Janitors, Microwave Popcorn, the writers of The Office, Scrubs, Entourage, My Name is Earl, Oz, Metalocalypse and the Boondocks, Aquafina, and The Periodic Table of Elements.